Hello, welcome to All for Women's Football. What a time to be a football manager and what a time to be alive. Casey Stoney, out of there. She's gone from San Diego Wave. Hot news that's just arrived in your inboxes. And we were going to talk about Emma Hayes. I'm sure we're going to talk about both. We're going to talk about the WSL. We're going to talk about how it looks now and how it can change like that. So with that in mind, let's get into it now. Well, hello again. What an absolute moment. Literally a minute before we were about to send the tweet out, we find out the news that Casey Stoney is gone from San Diego Wave. So I think what we'll do is we'll go, as we usually do, we'll pop around and say hello to everyone. But initial reactions on the fact that Casey Stoney, I can't even say she's been relieved of her duties. That's not what it says. It's mutual consent. But sometimes you wonder if there's more consent on one side than there might be on the other. But Jess, obviously you can't necessarily repeat what you said when you heard it, but what's your general view on that?
Bit of a shock, to be honest, because I was just saying to these lot backstage, I'm pretty sure that her family haven't long since kind of got themselves out there. I know her first kind of year or so there, I think her family were all still at home and just flying over periodically. So the fact that her family have now all fully uprooted their lives, moved over, and from the wording and the way the statement comes out, it looks like it is fairly one-sided. I will just quote a little bit of it where it says, the decision to part ways was very hard and not made in haste, but given the ambition of the club and where we are in our season, we felt that change was necessary at this time, which to me basically just sounds like the club is not doing or not performing as they should. They are just outside of the playoff zone. So I'm assuming that will be a big reason for why they have gotten rid of her. But I have to say, I'm quite surprised considering she's been doing pretty well over there and is a popular figure.
It is, I think, the news of the day, to be honest with you, and Violin saying there, Stoney gone, wow, never thought that would happen this season. I think that's generally what we're all feeling there. Meg, hello, and how are you feeling about this news that Casey Stoney has been, I mean, let's be honest, she's been sacked, hasn't she? That's certainly how that reads.
Yeah, I mean, you don't read that and really believe that it's a mutual agreement, do you? But I mean, it's baffling, really. I mean, obviously, San Diego Wave won the regular league, before all the playoffs get played, last year. So they did very well last year, and they're not quite there this year at the minute. But yeah, it just baffles me, and it will be very interesting now to see what happens, where she goes. Does she stay over in America, or does she make a return to the WSL? It'll be very interesting to see where she ends up, because she's got a great CV. So yeah, interesting.
Okay, well, I'm sure we will return to the Casey Stoney question a little bit later on in the show as we start looking at the landscape of the WSL. But as Erling says here, she just signed a contract a couple of months ago. So it's clearly, like Jess says, to do with the position they're in the league. Mia, you had no idea this had happened until you came onto this show. That's what we deliver here. Breaking news as it happens. Has that shocked you that she's gone so early in the season?
To be fair, I can't say I follow the NWSL very closely, so I've not really been tracking how she's been doing. But thinking back to when she left United, she was one of the most sought-after managers out there. And, she still has that great quality. As Meg and Jess have just said, she won the regular season league. So, I don't know how much more ambition they need. Like, how much more ambitious do you want to get? I think it's a strange decision. And especially for her now, all the big jobs are taken. Chelsea, Lyon, Barca, they've all gone. So it's going to be really interesting to see where. I've just been told they're in 9th place. TJ, I told you I don't know anything. I don't know anything apart from she was pretty good.
Nice one.
yeah, she was pretty. She's a good manager. You know that she knows what she's talking about, and it's going to be really interesting to see where she ends up.
It really, really will be. So there we go. But I'm sure she will pop up later on in the conversation as we start looking at the landscape of the WSL. But as you can see, although Mia is wearing her Italian top, I'm in the closest thing you'll ever see me when it comes to Chelsea. I've got 3 of these tops. One's red, one's navy blue, and one's blue. And I went to get one out, and this was the only one that I had left that wasn't in the wash. And I was like, oh, there we go. That's going to go perfectly tonight, because today we're going to give some props, I think. And we're going to start looking at the legacy of the person who I believe, certainly in the modern era, is probably the greatest manager that we've seen in the WSL, certainly over the last decade. So I kind of just wanted to have a little bit of a chat about the legacy that Emma Hayes has left. And if you'll indulge me just for a moment, I went for a little bit of a fact-finding mission on Emma Hayes, because I was quite intrigued. I've always just known her as... I'm not answering that, Emily. You know the answer to that. But I went on a bit of a fact-finding mission, because I only ever knew her as really the Chelsea manager. I didn't really know too much about what Emma Hayes did when she was younger and growing up, and what her route into management was. So for the uneducated like me, I'll just throw that one out there. She actually played for Arsenal, their academy, which was quite something. She was a midfielder, and she played for them for 8 years from the age of 9. But at the age of 17, she got an injury on her ankle. And obviously that was the end of her football playing career. So she went off and got some experience. She was at Liverpool Hope University College. So she did a little bit of coaching there, a bit in Croydon, a bit in Crystal Palace as well. And then she got herself a job in 2002 at the fabulously named Long Island Lady Riders. I don't think they felt that one through. But she was the youngest coach. Mia's gone. The youngest, just a real thing, youngest coach in the league. And she was the coach of the season. And they were first. It was absolutely unbelievable. So she picked the post with everybody else there, which was quite good. And they were unbeaten. So her first season as a manager went really, really well. She then had a couple of years at Iona Gales, which was neither here nor there really for them. And then she comes away and becomes the assistant coach at Arsenal between 2006 and 2008 underneath Vic Akers, where she helps them to win 11 trophies, including 3 Women's Premier League titles, 3 FA Cups, and a UEFA Women's Cup at the time. And she was also the academy director. So that took her up to around about 2008, where she went back to America for the Chicago Red Stars. Didn't really do too much with them. Ended up being an advisor for Western New York Flash. They've got great names in America, they really do. Where she helped, as I say, to build a side that went on to win the Women's Pro Soccer Championship before doing the same thing for Washington Freedom. And then in 2012, when the Olympics were taking place, the summer ones, that is, Matt Beard went to Liverpool. It's amazing how things sort of regurgitate themselves, isn't it? And as Matt Beard went off to Liverpool, Emma Hayes took over at Chelsea. And it's fair to say her time in Chelsea has been, pretty good, to be fair. She has won the Super League a ridiculous amount of times. She won the WSL Spring Series. She's won the FA Cup. She's won the League Cup. She's won the FA Community Shield. And she was a runner-up in the Women's Champions League in 2020-2021. So it's quite a season. I do have to say, having gone through it, it was quite interesting seeing the Wikipedia page where at the bottom it just says she's a diehard Spurs fan. And I can't work out if somebody's just gone in there and done a little bit of trolling and just thrown that sentence in there, or if that's a genuine thing. But I'd love it to be true. So that just gives you an idea as to what Emma Hayes has done. So, a simple question to begin with, Jess. Is she the greatest manager of the last 10 years, as far as we're concerned?
I think when you're looking at the English league, I think you'd be kind of hard pressed to disagree. I know a lot of people say that they don't like her, but I think sometimes people just don't like that she's quite like outspoken. She's very opinionated. She stands up for what she believes in. The documentary she did, that I think is available on YouTube with the Chelsea team, I thought that was absolutely fascinating. The way she like interacts with the players, the way she kind of just manages the team in general, I think is just sort of paves the way really for what coaching should be and what managers should be like. I think she's kind of maybe changed how managers are viewed in the women's game. They are now seen like it's, I don't know how to really explain it other than it's just completely professional. Like, I don't think she would be out of place managing a men's team, for example. And I think that bridging that gap, and instead of having kind of, oh, well, they're only fit to manage a women's team, or, women need to be treated differently, or, you've got to talk nicely to them, whatever, or they're all going to cry. I think she's proven that, no, just treat them like humans, and her achievements and what she's won, I think, speak for themselves. I think the only thing she'll be disappointed is that she never got to win a Champions League with Chelsea. And I mean, getting the job in the US women's national team, we've seen with the firing of, assumed firing of Casey Stoney, they only have the best, basically. So the fact that they've taken her kind of shows that us here in the UK aren't the only people that think so highly of her.
No, absolutely. You're right to bring up the US women's national team, because they've obviously had 2 friendlies, I believe, against South Korea and won both of them. Haven't conceded a goal yet. So, yeah, very, very interesting. Meg, I know this might be a tough question for you to answer, but how do you rank? Maybe it's not so tough, actually, seeing as she has been at the club that you support as well. But, like, genuinely, when you look at Emma Hayes and all that she has accomplished, everything that I've just listed there, would you rank her as the greatest manager that we've seen in the WSL for the last 10 years?
Yeah, a simple answer and short answer for me is yes. I mean, you look at a lot of managers have, quite illustrious playing careers and then they go on to manage. And maybe Emma Hayes would have had that if she hadn't have had her injury. But the fact that she's basically not really had, a professional playing career and sort of worked her way up from the ground, for coaching and has gone on. I think the one thing you have to look at is the longevity, how long she's done it for. It's ridiculous, and it's so admirable to anyone that wants to be a coach in the women's or the men's game. You look at Emma Hayes and you go, she's a role model. Because when Emma Hayes came in 2012, women's football wasn't what it is now. It wasn't at all what it is now. But now you look and everyone, that wants to be a coach in the women's game will probably say, I want to be like Emma Hayes. And I don't blame them, because she's built that professional environment at Chelsea, and she's not necessarily had the best players in the world all the time. She's just got the best out of the players that she signed in that professional environment. You look at all the positions and, she's not had the best left back in the world, as an example. Yes, she's had like the likes of Sam Kerr, Pernilla Harder, as examples of players that, are at the top of their games. But she's just utilised the players that she's signed and that she's had perfectly, and you can't fault her for that. So, yeah, this short answer is yes. I don't think there's anyone that's done it better than her in the women's game.
I think I've got to agree. And Mia, I don't want what I'm about to say to come across as being disrespectful to the women's game, but is the fact that when we talk about the first, I know that we've had one, but the first women's manager in the 92 for the men's game, the fact that the name that is always mentioned that could do it is Emma Hayes, is that the proof that she is the best manager that we've seen over these last 10 years?
It's funny, actually, Barry, because I was going to say, this is, the rise in the popularity of women's football happened in the Euros in England. We all know that. But as a fan, pre-Euros, I would always hear Emma Hayes, probably like 2018, 2019, and her name's being thrown about, the same sort of way that Lucy Bronze's name was thrown about, as she could play for a lot of the men's teams. And it's, you know, I can understand why people think that's annoying and frustrating to compare the two, but equally when you are looking at the men's game, and for decades that has been the pinnacle of football, that has been the only football, that's been the professional football, that's got millions of fans around the world, to say that there's a woman who has led a women's team to loads of fantastic silverware, to step into a team within a men's league, is huge. It's massive, and she would absolutely deserve that chance. But like she's always said, it doesn't matter who she's coaching. She at the minute, well, when she had this interview that I'm talking about, she was manager of Chelsea, and they were competing for the Champions League. And it's the Champions League, regardless whether it's men's or women's, she's still going to try and compete for the Champions League. And I think she currently, where she is in the US national team, is the greatest job, the biggest, most high pressure job in women's football. And there is no better person than Emma Hayes to take that role on. And I'm really excited to see her transform her style slightly. She's not seeing these players week in, week out. She has to keep in touch with them in a different way. I still think she can be amazingly successful, which is a real pain for the English when we eventually do play against her. But yeah, I think it is a compliment on her behalf, but I also don't like saying that. But yeah, she could absolutely coach any of those teams, in my opinion, and get a fair few points on the board. But just because her style, the documentary she's done, you can see the passion. She's so tactically sound and is such a master of the game. You can hear it when she does the commentary every now and then, when we're blessed to hear her in the punditry box. So yeah, I hope I answered your question. I just went on a rampage there, I think.
You absolutely did answer the question, Mia. Well done. Congratulations. Jess, just to swing it back round, we've spoken a bit about Hayes in the past. I want to kind of look now at, as we look at WSL and women's football and how it stands, at the legacy that Emma Hayes is going to leave going forward. And Casey Chapman, who of course was an England international, has played for Arsenal, has played for Chelsea, she said that Emma Hayes built everything at Chelsea, from having the kit washed, to having food, to having their own building, to having their own training and pitches, and getting it into a professional setup. When you now look at the WSL and you look at Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea, City, all of the top clubs, they generally have facilities of some sort, whether that be using Lee, whether that be going now to the Emirates, or as it was at Boreham Wood for Arsenal. We're seeing the facilities rise up and be used. Do you think, Jess, that Emma Hayes is almost like the catalyst for that happening? Can we credit Emma Hayes with the fact that women's football is starting to get more professional? Or do you think that, as Mia said, the Euros and all that sort of thing has just sort of helped, and that's sort of showing the fruits of the labour that Emma Hayes showed in sort of the first 6 to 10 years of her career at Chelsea?
I'd say she would definitely be one of the sort of front runners for it. She has driven the game forward an astronomical amount. Like one of the comments said down there, Chelsea had nothing, basically, and she had to fight for everything. And I think when you look, and we'll just focus on English women's football for a second, like when you look at some of the kind of key movers, let's say you're looking at people like Hope Powell for the national team, they almost had to pick their battles though as well. Like you can't, or back then, and even now to some extent, you couldn't go to whoever, say the high ups at Chelsea, and go, right, I want this, 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 and this. Get it for me next week. Like Emma Hayes will have had to have gone in and go, okay, this month I'm going to ask for X. Then we will use X. We will show how we've used X to develop our team. And then in a few months' time, I'm going to go and ask for Y. So it's not even as simple as just kind of asking for things. Like you had to be so tactical with how you ask for things, because people didn't particularly for a long time want to invest that much in the women's game. Obviously, things like the Euros have happened. Players like Lucy Bronze, like Mia mentioned before, have been fantastic for the image of the game. But you've got to say Emma Hayes, along with some other kind of key players, key managers, or just key figures in the women's game, have pushed it forward massively. And in terms of kind of clubs, Chelsea and Arsenal, I'll always give Arsenal credit for this, their kind of marketing and just their facilities for a long time as well. You know, Arsenal have always been the kind of front runners in English women's football, and that's why they did so fantastically well for years, whilst other clubs but basically didn't even have a team. So I think there's been a lot of driving forces, but you've got to say Emma Hayes will have been a huge one, especially for Chelsea.
It's interesting, Emily Moxon talking about the standards being helped by Emma Hayes, but more recently putting it down to the Euros win. She's also talking about a certain side in Merseyside that have Melwood for the girls, and I think that's really nice of Everton to do that. That's right, Emily, I went there. I know it's not Everton, really, just pushing some buttons. Meg, for you, when we talk about the legacy, let's look at the legacy just at Chelsea for a moment. With everything that she's done there, obviously Sonia Bonpastor has just taken on the role. Obviously, we've not seen anything of her with regards to the WSL just yet. But I have to liken it to the Premier League when Alex Ferguson left Manchester United. It was a big change. And I think we are talking about, in terms of the two spheres, very similar types of impact on one club and one league. If Emma Hayes has just left Chelsea, can you see that being a problem for Bonpastor, that she's got almost like the ghost of Emma Hayes to deal with? Or do you feel like she's going to slot nicely into that position and will just be able to continue the good work that Emma Hayes has done?
You could look at it both ways. I mean, look, 12 years Emma Hayes spent at Chelsea. So every single player that is in that Chelsea side now, that's all they know. Emma Hayes is all they know. And that's not, that doesn't happen very often. For example, half of Arsenal's team, knew Joe Montemuro because they were there before Jonas Eidevall came in, for example. But now all those Chelsea players, they've got a new leader in a sense. And she's got the biggest boots to fill in Emma Hayes. And there is so much pressure on her that there's no denying that, because of the legacy that Emma Hayes has left at Chelsea as well as the WSL. But in terms of if she can implement her playing style on those players that Chelsea still have and it works, then people won't really bat an eyelid in a sense, I guess, because if Chelsea carry on winning and winning, then, people aren't going to question it and they're going to say that, that's just what Chelsea do, sort of thing. But if it starts to sort of not go wrong, but if problems start to emerge, then it just goes to show how big those boots are that Bonpastor has to fill of Emma Hayes's. And I wouldn't like to be in her shoes. I don't think anyone would like to be in her shoes with the amount of pressure that she does have on her to succeed. I mean, obviously, she's succeeded massively at Lyon. But Lyon, I think she even said herself, like, she knew that Lyon were the best French team by quite a mile. So she sort of didn't leave the team to do what they needed to do, but she didn't have as much pressure on her to sort of deliver as a manager, because every other team, obviously, apart from maybe PSG, are so far behind in the French league. But, with the English game, every team now is sort of creeping up. Your Arsenal, your Man Cities, your Man Uniteds, your Liverpools, and even below, every single team is getting better and better. And it's only going to be a matter of time until someone sort of catches Chelsea and maybe sort of they become the dominant side in the English league. And it'll be interesting to see, will that happen, or will Chelsea just continue to dominate in the English game?
I think that's what's going to be exciting to watch, isn't it, Meg? Really seeing how this season goes. And Kieran pointing out here as well, She was the first to recognise women for women, taking into account periods, pelvic floor exercises, all those sorts of things. And as she says, women are not small men. Absolutely not. You know, women are women. And, you know, watching the Chelsea documentary that was on DAZN that time was absolutely unreal, seeing the level of effort they put into it. Like, literally everything's charted, so they know when everything's supposed to happen, so they know whether they need to increase or decrease the load and all the work they're trying to do. Genuinely, the fact that they put this sort of science behind it and really tried to help, I think shows just, again, what an absolutely brilliant coach she was. Mia, just to finish this bit with Emma Hayes, Emily's put, you know, the manager has to be allowed to bring her own boots, so to speak, and not be compared too much to Emma. Do you think that's the danger for Chelsea going forward now, that if there is a dodgy result or two within the first few games, that we're going to have a bit of a comparison, or if she doesn't manage to win a trophy or doesn't manage to win the league, that there's going to be that comparison of, oh, she's not as good as Emma Hayes? Is that going to be a drama, do you think, for Chelsea fans, or do you think that they will just embrace Bompastor?
I think Chelsea fans have to realise, and once they do understand this, it's going to be a lot easier, and they're going to understand the process of what most teams feel. For one manager to stay in one place for 12 years is unheard of. It doesn't happen. She has built that project from scratch. The reason she's won the league was it 5 seasons in a row? I made that up. If that's for a reason, she's built that team. They know her inside out. She knows them inside out. Someone's just said in the comments as well, she's taken 3 to 4 of her assistants as well. And you see the impact of assistant coaches. For example, Man United, when Martin Ho left, there's a big gap that you see behind that you don't normally see behind the scenes. But when they're gone, it's another big missing piece of the puzzle. So Sonia's going to have to come in. They're going to have to get used to her assistant coaches. There's going to be a whole new team of people to get to know. She's got to get to know them. It's going to take some time. Now, Chelsea have the talent and the qualities. Whether Sonia tries to pick up where Emma left off, we don't know. We'll see. I think it's going to be a really clunky season for Chelsea, but that's so understandable. And they have to give her the benefit of the doubt, because she's coming into this club that has had one person for 12 years. It's all they've known. It's not going to be... I don't think she's just going to pick up where she left off and run with it. Even though the players could do that, and the players are the quality of the players, we've also got to remember that Emma Hayes did buy in January. So there's also players that Sonia may not have bought, or, you know, may want to sell, or this transfer window is going to be pretty interesting to watch from Chelsea as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think Chelsea fans need to just understand that winning a title for 5 seasons in a row is so unheard of, and the domination Chelsea have sort of implemented across that league for 12 years is just welcome to real football for a hot minute. But I do hope she does really well, because obviously that's a hard job. That's a really, really hard job. So yeah.
No, absolutely. And TJ, I've got a clue. I don't know if she's bringing her assistants from Lyon with her to Chelsea. Does anyone know this?
Quickly, yes, she is bringing 2 assistants with her. So
TJ.
That one. I'd try and pronounce their names, but I will probably butcher it. Camille Abili and Theo Rivrin. So I'm assuming that they are currently assistants, but yes, she's bringing those 2 with her to Chelsea.
There you go, TJ. See, look at this. What a night for news on All for Wofo this is. There we go. So that's our ode to Emma Hayes. 7 WSLs, 5 FA Cups, 2 League Cups, a Community Shield. She will be missed, I think, in the WSL. Nice little segue, though, into what we wanted to begin to look at, which is the landscape of the WSL as it stands. And I've got to ask the question, and I'm going to come to Jess first on this one. Taking a look at Chelsea, we know already Fran Kirby's going. We know that Maren Mjelder's going, so we've heard about both of those. they've still got a few players that haven't signed their contracts, but even though their contract is ending, they're not necessarily first team players. Big question for you on this one. Can you see Chelsea still dominating at the top, or do you see there being a transition period at the beginning for Chelsea that all of the other clubs will need to try and take advantage of if they want this season to be a different result to the usual Chelsea title parade?
I definitely think that now is the time for other teams to kind of step up, because I do think we will, like Mia said, see a different Chelsea, potentially early days of disjointed Chelsea. So if other teams can step up, then absolutely, I think they can make the most out of this little kind of transitional period that Chelsea are going to be in, because you cannot avoid that. Like we've already covered, 12 years is a hell of a long time. So there's going to be a transitional period. And I think if teams like Arsenal, City especially, I want to say United, but who knows, if teams like them can kind of step up and take this as their opportunity to actually get points from Chelsea, then I think this could be the season to kind of do it. I think long term, Chelsea will just carry on an upwards trajectory. I think Bonpasta is going to be a fantastic manager for them. I do just think there's going to be a little wobbly period maybe where if other teams can take advantage of maybe players not quite understanding new roles that they've given or new formations, new tactics, I think that maybe for a season or so, we might see a slight drop, but realistically, they're not going to slow down anytime soon. They're going to be absolutely fine. They've got their sights set. I mean, they're linked to Bon Matty, for God's sake. I mean, I don't think they're going to get her, but the point is that they're like, it's in the same sentence. You know what I mean? That is where they are at. They are steamrolling everyone. So we might see a little dip, but not long term, I don't think.
You're on mute, Barry.
I think I tend to agree with you. And Meg, I wanted you to look at Manchester City because they were a really interesting one. After 10 years, Steph Horton hanging up her boots, she's going to be gone. We know that Demi Stokes, Ellie Roebuck, Angeldal, Ruby May, Esme Morgan, all gone. We know that they are leaving the club. And that, I feel, has to be a little bit of a worry for Manchester City. Now, they are capable, of course, of bringing in some great players as well. They've had a good season. How do you see Man City looking into next season? The fact that they're going to be missing, I mean, I know that Steph Horton didn't play a huge number of games this season, but that's a big name to sort of lose around there. Ellie Roebuck, obviously, as well, a very capable goalkeeper. What's your thoughts on City as we move at this moment in time?
I mean, when you give me that list of players, you'd think, oh my God, they're going to struggle massively, because that's a lot of players that, they're moving on or has retired. I must say, I love the fact Ellie Roebuck's gone to Barcelona. I really hope she does very well because I think she's an outstanding goalkeeper. But you still look at that.
Surprised?
No.
You weren't surprised to see Roebuck go to Barcelona?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Just me then.
But you still look at, even with all those players going / retiring, you look at that City side and they have got such quality in that squad. And they've got a real range of ages as well. Like some of those players are still so young. Like Lauren Hemp is still a very young player. You've got like Jess Park, she's ridiculously young. You've got, a midfield with Yui Hasegawa there, Jill Roord, who's, it was really unfortunate for her to get her ACL injury because she would have absolutely tore it up across the season. But, if they are going to compete for the league, which is what they will definitely be looking to do next season, which is what they've been looking to do for the past few seasons, and they have come close because, they've put in some brilliant performances. They've signed some incredible players. But yeah, I think this is one of this season is definitely one that they'll look and go, we can win. Not we can go on and win the league, but like we have such a good chance this season now because of Emma Hayes leaving. I know, yes, fans were a bit skeptical about Gareth Taylor signing a new contract, but I mean, he's doing a good enough job of keeping them in, title races every season. And look, if they're going to get Viv Miedema over the summer, a front two of Bunny Shaw and Viv Miedema, I mean, who's realistically going to stop them? No one really. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to obviously see if they do sign Miedema, which it'll be interesting because I've heard that she also really wouldn't be against a move abroad because she still wants a Champions League, to her name sort of thing. But it will be interesting to see who else they, sort of sign, whether they sign any top class names, any world class names. But yeah, I can see them definitely pushing for the league next season.
No, I think most sensible people will look at City and imagine that. Mia, for you, looking at Arsenal, obviously they've got 3 people that have been named as leaving. One of them, I'm going to, my turn, start butchering things now, Jess, is Kaylan Marquez. She's only played twice, so, never mind. So she's gone. Sabrina D'Angelo, only the 14 appearances. The big name that is out of contract this season, as Meg's just alluded to, is Vivianne Miedema. How do you see that affecting the Arsenal morale, the Arsenal squad? And equally, do you see Miedema going off to Manchester City? And if so, could you answer Meg's question? Who can stop the Bunny and Viv tram?
No one. There is not a defence in that league that can stop those two when they're on the attack. There's just no way. Yeah, I mean, as TJ's just said there, it's not only losing Viv, they've also lost Palova to an ACL injury. And that's a huge, huge loss because what a great couple of seasons she's had. Her sort of rise to being that sort of player that no one really knew to like shining on game after game. So yeah, that's a real pain for Arsenal. I think Viv is, there's not really much you can say about that. That's a world-class player. That's one of the best strikers in the world, leaving your club for free. I think, like, business head and football club head, you go, how on earth have you let her go for free? And you're not getting any compensation for that to bring someone as quality or as close in quality as you possibly can back in. I know they've got Alessio Russo, but I know that God, please excuse me if I'm just talking rubbish here, but I'm sure Jonas said that he wanted to play Miedema and Russo together. So they were like sort of bouncing off of each other. I think Miedema sat a little bit deeper when she did play Russo on because Russo is the goal scorer. But sorry if I've got that wrong. But yeah, I think those two essentially missing now is a sore one for Arsenal, but they are on the upward trajectory. Obviously, they had the season before last was full of the ACLs and nightmare season. They finished 3rd this season, 5 points away from the top spot. They're getting back to the Arsenal that used to dominate alongside Chelsea. And they did lose that for a couple of seasons. They have lost that for a couple of seasons. And I do agree. I think the manager is a slight issue because now, obviously, we've probably all seen that video that went round of the altercation on the side of the pitch. We don't really know what happened, but the Arsenal fans have made their own mind up of what happened. And obviously then Viv leaving and laughing at some signs that made her laugh. I think it's the last thing you need in a squad is a manager that you don't believe in or a manager that's, got ethics that don't align to yours. Because that's when things start going a bit skewy. That's when players don't want to turn up for their team, don't want to turn up for their manager. I think everyone in that squad would turn up for the fans because Arsenal fans are the best fans in the world. I would argue they are everywhere. You can't move for Arsenal fans, but yeah, I think that's the only thing that's going to really hold them back. Obviously, losing Viv is massive. You can replace a player. You can't replace a coaching philosophy like Jonas is. So unless that changes or unless he chills out a little bit, that could be Arsenal's only problem.
Very interesting points to be made there. So it will be very intriguing to see how Arsenal gets on. Jess, we're going to look at Liverpool now. So Emily's ears have just pricked up. A bit like Arsenal, Liverpool don't really tell us too much about the lengths of the contract. So we're not sure if there's anybody else who might potentially be out of contract. But Shanice van der Sanden and Emma Kovisto and Miri Taylor, they've been announced as leaving. Kovisto, interestingly, I believe was mentioned in our Team of the Year conversations. So that's a big defensive change. And Melissa Lawley as well, who's featured over 100 times for them as well. So a couple of big names there that are going to be leaving during this closed season. Can you see Liverpool maintaining a similar sort of assault on the top 3, top 4 as they did this season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is fundamentally going to be their main aim for the season. You know, they did fantastically well in the end. They potentially kind of exceeded expectations. If you consider where they were the season before, you know, they'd only just moved up back into WSL. They obviously, their aim would have just been to stay up. They succeeded and they pushed on. And I mean, finishing 4th for them was amazing, to be honest. I would have thought that at the start of the season, their aim would be kind of start pressing the kind of top 4, but to beat United and kind of finish ahead of them. I think it's a credit to Matt Beard, first off. I think he's a really fantastic manager, to be fair to him. I think he got manager of the season this season for a reason. I think he is a great manager. Like that comment says, all the players seem to love him. They seem to buy into his philosophy. I think whilst there's some players leaving who would be considered kind of big losses, I'd like to think from a footballing perspective that Liverpool as a club are going to want to push on. And I would be very interested to see who they look at getting in this summer. Because I think if they kind of shore up their side a little bit more with another couple of kind of world-class players or very good players, let's say, then I think they will, you know, really start pushing again, because traditionally they've won the WSL, or, you know, the form it used to be. They were always a very good team. When they dropped out of the top tier, it was a real shock, to be honest. And essentially they're just now back where they should be. They're obviously taking the women's team a little bit more seriously again, which is, for the game again, it's just good to see. I think people seem to buy into Matt Beard's philosophy. So if he can get some quality players in this summer, then I don't see why in another season or so they wouldn't be pushing for the top spot, even potentially this season. I'm not saying that this season they're going to do it, but at the end of the day, within the next few years, that is going to be their aim. You know, Liverpool are not a club that are going to be content with kind of finishing outside of Champions League. That is going to be their aim. And those Champions League spots there's not any more of them appearing, but there's more and more teams that are going to be pushing for them. So I think it's definitely going to be an interesting season, and I don't know whether I'm excited or not to see what Liverpool do, because as a fan of a different team, I think it's just another opposition, but it's good quality teams. It makes for a good quality game. It's only going to improve the league as a whole.
So, I mean, Emily is saying she thinks they can definitely challenge and even get a Champions League spot, but she's not biased. So there we go. Meg, we're going to come to you next. And in case you haven't worked it out, we're sort of going down in order of the WSL table, and then just going around in order as well. So that's kind of where we are. We're not necessarily going to do every single team. It depends on how big the sort of outs are as we stand. But at Manchester United, Meg, there's some big names on this list. Now, there's 6 names, all of whom are out of contract. And at the moment, Manchester United have released absolutely no information whatsoever about any of them. But potentially, without an extension being given or anything being mentioned, Manchester United could be without Mary Earps. They could be without their captain, Katie Zellum, their top goal scorer, Nikita Paris, their second top goal scorer, Lucia Garcia, their oldest goal scorer, Rachel Williams, and their most loved goal scorer in Melvine Mallard, who is a loanee, to be fair, so it's not quite the same thing. That's a lot of people that they could lose. If they were to have a season or a closed season where all of those players don't have their contracts renewed, can you see Manchester United really attacking those top three positions, or do you think that would be a negative start to the season and that they would have to have like the world's best transfer window in order for that to come around the right way for them?
Oh, completely. I mean, the names you just mentioned there, yes, Man U haven't had the greatest season. Obviously, the FA Cup winners kind of helped sort of take some of the pressure off that in a sense. But those players that you've just named there, most of them have, had very decent seasons. Nikita Paris in front of goal. Lucia Garcia has had a very good season as well. And Katie Zellum, Katie Zellum is Katie Zellum. She's a leader. No one really knows that position better than she does at Man United. And, she's kind of one of those irreplaceable players in a sense at Man United because of what she brings on the pitch and off the pitch. So if all of those players, obviously they're out of contract, and if they, were to not sign on and not stay, Man U would have to have, like one of the best transfer windows in women's football history if they want to push on, because you'd lose half of your or most of your forwards if you're losing Lucia Garcia, Rachel Williams, Nikita Paris. Like, if you do not recruit in those areas, then what the hell is going to happen? They already lost Russo to Arsenal. So if they don't do anything about that, then it's just going to continue in a downhill trajectory in a sense. And I saw earlier that Jim Ratcliffe has basically come out and sort of said he hasn't focused on the women's team yet. He's been focusing on the issues that the first team have faced, because obviously both sides, men and women, have not had a good season domestically, at all. It's been, I don't want to say pretty atrocious, but for Man U, if you look at the brand Man U, the history behind the team is ridiculous, and you expect them to always be up there, for trophies, etc., etc. So the fact that they're not, and all these contract talks are still going on, nothing's been said. I do feel for Man U fans, because I'm saying, like, all of you on here basically, because it's not nice. Mary Earps has been, she's been branded, the best goalkeeper in the world. Whether people still think that or not, you can't deny that she is one of the best goalkeepers, in the women's game at the minute. And if Man U were to lose her, I mean, obviously Fallon Toulis-Joyce, I think she's a cracking up and coming goalkeeper. But you can't just have her in your team. You need to recruit again. I mean, Fallon Toulis-Joyce would probably do an excellent job at, coming as number one goalkeeper, but then you need someone else to then go under her. And unfortunately, I don't know if Man U will be able to recruit as well as they probably need to in the summer if they are to push on for, because if they manage to get, Champions League next season, they will then want to really, actually cement their place in, the Champions League and become a Champions League club, like Arsenal and Chelsea kind of have. But they would need to do so much in order to become a club that is seen as a Champions League club. And at the minute, I can't see that happening. I think they will struggle a bit next season. Jess has just spoke about how Liverpool are, really improving in the season they've had. And if other teams, do that, like Spurs, for example, which Mia, I believe, is going to talk about, then, they're going to start falling down, and that's not what you want.
Yeah, I'm just going to move on because that's what people are asking me to do on that one. So, I'm nice like that. And we are going to move to Spurs, which sort of has a Man United tint to it as well. Because, they've got a few people that are out of contract but are not yet named as definitely leaving. within that, you've got Amy Turner, or Amy James Turner, as she's written down in a lot of places now, but obviously an ex-Manchester United player, so she could potentially be leaving the club, along with Becky Spencer and Drew Spence. So they're three that are, possibly going to be leaving the club. You've also got Ramona Petzelberger, Ria Percival, Shalina Zadorsky, Gracie Pearce, Esmita Raleigh, Ellie Brazil, it's a brilliant name, and Nicola, oh my God, Karchewska. Anyway, Nikki, she's leaving. And of course, wait till I get to Brighton. And Grace Clinton, of course, is going to be coming back to Manchester United. So, with regards to Spurs, they had a better season this season, I feel, than they had the previous season. Can you see Spurs being one of those teams, a bit like Liverpool and potentially Manchester United, who could come in and start to try to challenge for those top three positions or the number 4 spot? Or can you see Spurs not doing so well? And how important do you think the loss of Grace Clinton is going to be? Obviously, you were at the FA Cup final. You saw that Grace Clinton wasn't able to play. And to be fair, Spurs as a team did not really turn up to the manner they could have done. If Grace Clinton had been playing, maybe it might have been a slightly different type of midfield for them. And do you think that Grace Clinton being added to the Manchester United squad would make up for one or two of those players potentially not signing their contract?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a bit of a saga until we hear from either side about Grace Clinton. I know that obviously Tottenham naturally are after her after the season that she's had. There are rumours that Mark Skinner wants her to stay, as she should do from a Manchester United perspective. So yeah, that's obviously she's had an unbelievable season. That's exactly what you want those kind of players to do. Go out on loan, take that opportunity and just smash it. It was sad for her that she couldn't play in the FA Cup final because that's such a huge event, and I do think that she could have positively influenced that game for Spurs. Obviously, there is such a conflict of interest there that she couldn't possibly have played. But yeah, Spurs, I think for them now, I think the fact that Robert Villahan wasn't given the Manager of the Season award was a little bit crazy to get a Tottenham team that, they're not full of stars. They're not a world-class team, but they rightfully were in an FA Cup final, and they've had a really solid season. But on the flip side, I think I'm sort of starting to see where Robert Villaham's project's going here, because if all of those, did you say 3 or 4 players? I think it was 3 players that you said there that are out of contract. All of those are really, or sort of the 3 main ones, are really experienced players who are pushing towards the end of their careers. But I think Robert Villaham is someone who's really interested in a youth project, someone who's like homegrown, bring the homegrown players in, youth, like insert some energy into the team, and really build a project. And I think that's the only reason why he'd let those players go. But it's exciting, and Spurs fans should be excited. And I absolutely believe that they've set those standards so high. They've proven they can get to an FA Cup final. It's the same as United last year. When they got to the FA Cup final, they didn't win it. They went back and they won it because they know what it's like then to just narrowly miss out on something. So I'm not saying that Tottenham are going to be challenging for the title or the FA Cup final every year, but they have set some standards now and they're going to want to try and keep that up. So I think they are going to push top 4, but it's like a lot of these teams now. You could look at the top 6 of the WSL this season and say they should all want to be pushing for top 4 next season. That's so exciting because it gives such a competitive aspect of, okay, Chelsea probably going to win the league, that's fine. But then everything else is like, there are Champions League places up for grabs. There are Conti Cup wins and games and FA Cup games, and it makes the league so much more interesting when it's not dominated by one team. And I think Spurs, and I don't do like we did with Villa last season, where we was like Villa had a really good season and they're going to come back and smash it, and they just didn't really. I don't want to do that with Spurs, but I do think that they've got the manager behind them that's got the aspirations and the vision and the application that can do that.
Seems reasonable to me. Good job. Jess, we're going to come over to you for a little double header now. I'm going to ask you to take a look at Villa and Everton. Villa have got an interesting one at the moment with Olivia McLaughlin going out. She's off to Rangers. Jordan Nobbs also ends her contract, but she does have the option, so she could potentially stay. Lucy Staniforth, someone who you will be quite familiar with, her contract is coming to an end there as well, along with Simone McGill, Anna Leet and Danielle Turner. And of course, they have no manager with Carla Ward walking away at the end of the season. Everton as well have got Courtney Brosnan going, Sarah and Karen Holmgard potentially going. I say they're going, sorry, the end of contracts. They're not necessarily announced as leaving yet. No, that wasn't a bombshell. No, I don't know something. I've just accidentally, it's written there, no idea. But can you see Tony Duggan as well being another one? She's back from maternity leave, but obviously may stay out a bit longer. My questions for you really on that: can you see Villa or Everton doing any better this season? And the key question for you with regards to them: can you see Casey Stoney potentially returning back to England and taking over the Aston Villa job? Would she see that as the sort of project that she would like to do?
So I think it would be something that Villa would look at, based on how. So at the start of last season, obviously, I think everyone thought that Villa would really kind of kick on because they did very well the season before, and they was pretty disappointing really in the end. That they were very much a mid-table team. They have actually extended the contracts of Jordan Nobbs and Danielle Turner, which I think is probably a positive move for them. But I think the Casey Stoney thing is interesting. And the main reason why I think she wouldn't come back is because, like I said, her family have only just got over there. I do feel like, logistically speaking, I don't know how, after like only being there for a few months, they're all going to uproot their lives and come back to England. Logistically, I think that Casey's going to have to stay in the States. And from the responses, not to go back on something we've already covered, but on the responses on just what I've seen on Twitter, everyone's, for the most part, shocked at the news. So I think that she'll pick up another job easily. That being said, I think it is a conversation that would potentially be had. I think she would do very well with the Aston Villa team. But again, would that be considered like a step down from her? You know, she left United to move abroad to kind of further herself. If she came back and went to Villa, she's essentially joining a team that, best will in the world, will potentially always kind of just be mid-table maybe, unless something more changes higher up behind the scenes. I think same with Everton. You know, when you look back at previous seasons, I think Everton's kind of main goal is just, one, to stay up, and two, to probably just be a kind of top half finishing team. You know, I remember when I was a kid, they had some, you know, very, very good players. It just seems to be that these days they're almost a selling club, basically. You know, a lot of their players get shipped off abroad or picked up by kind of bigger teams. I know they're obviously expanding their home ground, but I mean, their home ground is, considering they are a WSL side, their home ground is a local park, to put it politely. And I don't necessarily know enough about the club, but if that is any indication of kind of how they run things, if I'm a player in that position, I'm going to want to push on to a team that at least has stands, which I do believe they are now building, like I said. But And I don't mean to go in so hard on them. I actually have no beef with Everton at all. If anything, I'm saying this because I want them to improve their women's stuff. You know, you've got teams playing in like stadiums, even, you know, like LSV, for example, with United, there's like 10,000, 11,000 seats or availability, whatever. Everton can get about 1,500. It's not really good enough for where we are with women's football, but I think that's a separate topic. So to answer your question, Barry, which I can't really remember what it was at this point, I don't think either of those teams in the foreseeable are going to do much more than be mid-table, to be completely honest. I think too much would need changing with the infrastructure of the clubs.
Fair enough. 9th and 10th was taken up by Brighton and Leicester, both of whom currently struggling as well in terms of their head coaches. It was a bit of a tricky one. Melissa Phillips was sacked in February. They did not get a permanent manager in at that time. And with Leicester as well, suspending Willie Kirk, that has been somewhat of a drama around both sides. Leicester have got Eileen Whelan, Josie Green, Amy Palmer and Remy Simpson leaving, but they haven't announced any other contracts. But interestingly, Meg, when you get to Brighton, Katie Robinson is definitely leaving. Liz Turland is on the list of players whose contracts are out at the end of this season, along with Poppy Pattinson, Dejana Stevanovic, who is literally one letter away from being Dejan Stevanovic, which is a player that I do know from a different game. And they've got a great player called Lulu Jarvis, and I love the fact there's someone called Lulu. It makes me want to shout. What do you think about... Thank you. What do you think about Brighton and Leicester? They've really had a difficult season last season. If Brighton lose people like Liz Turner and Katie Robinson, are they going to be able to bring in players that are of a level that's going to help them to grow in this league? Or are we looking with Brighton and Leicester at, and I use this term lovingly, relegation fodder?
I mean, Brighton are so lucky that they have Liz Turland, because I believe, if I've done my maths correct, she has scored exactly 50% of their league goals this season. She scored 13 and they've scored 26. And at the start of the season, I think like the first quarter, she had scored 70% of their goals. I mean, if you're relying on one person and hardly anyone else to score your goals, and especially now with her being linked to, you know, other sides, like I know Connor has said time and time again she'd love to see her at United. He'd love to see her at United. Yeah, Brighton are in a very sticky situation because, yeah, I mean, when they brought in, well, the two names that I remember them bringing in last season in Pauline Bremer and Vicky Lasada, and you look at those names and you look at their CVs, they've had pretty impressive careers. And, you know, for them to go to Brighton, you think, oh, Brighton are, you know, maybe they're going to not kickstart anything spectacular, but maybe they're going to push on and try and sort of get to a more mid-table position in the league. But yeah, I think you're right in terms of, like, obviously you don't want to call any team sort of relegation fodder, but I think they finished 10th last season. They finished 9th this season. You know, that's not a major improvement. And then you look at Leicester, I think they finished 10th across, you know, this season and last season. So there's, you know, pretty much no improvement there. But, you know, Leicester, they got to the semi-final of the FA Cup. You know, they'll look at that and they'll say, you know, we got that far in an FA Cup. We nearly made it to Wembley for a final. And yeah, I mean, fair play to them, because, you know, for any team to get that far is, you know, credit to them, sort of thing. And I believe they did get the highest points tally this season. Obviously, that doesn't really, you know, people can look at that and go, oh my God, they got the highest points tally in their history. That's incredible. But when you're finishing 10th, you know, it's not great, really. And they were so close to, you know, relegation last season. And, well, because they finished the same place this season, you can say they were close to relegation. This season, maybe it wasn't, you know, as tight, but you can't, I just can't seem to think how teams like Brighton and Leicester are really going to kick on next season, because there's probably problems going on behind the scenes, but no player is currently looking at either of those teams and going, I want to go there and I want to, obviously you're not going to win anything with them, probably, but no player is looking at them and going, oh, I want to join, what's going on at Brighton. I want to join what's going on at Leicester. Like Katie Robinson, it's for Brighton, it's the worst thing possible for her to leave, but she's at that point in her career. She is such a talented youngster. And obviously we have seen spells of her in an England shirt where she's really shown what she can do. But if she stays at Brighton, she is not going to reach her full potential. She has to go somewhere where they're really going to look at her and go, we've got someone that's got such a high ceiling with us, and we need to use her to the best of, their ability and her ability. And yeah, Brighton isn't the place for that. And unfortunately, with those clubs, you do lose your star players, and then you are in a bit of a pickle. But yeah, I can't see either of those sides really pushing on next season unless they get a miracle.
Indeed, I think it is going to be very tough. And TJ asking again, isn't Turlin's contract up though? Well, yeah, Big Liz will indeed be out of contract, along with the other people that I listed earlier on. So it'll be very interesting to see if they choose to renew any of those. Mia, we finish off the WSL with the last remaining side that didn't go down, West Ham, and the side that came up, Crystal Palace. Now, I don't expect you to know chapter and verse about Crystal Palace, but there will be some interesting points. And my main question with regards to them is, can you see them coming up and giving, with the greatest respect, a better fist of it than that Bristol managed to do? Or do you think we could be looking at a league at the moment where it is just yo-yo all the time, and it's, you get promoted and then you're immediately down again? And also your thoughts on West Ham. They did not do as well as West Ham would usually do, and it wasn't the greatest of seasons. Obviously, you've got Rhiannon Skinner in charge there. Their captain, Mackenzie Arnold, her contract is up at the end of this season. She was also Hammer of the Year, which, to be honest, I thought was an award you get at B&Q. But there we go. So apparently she is... I did. But there you go. It's right next to Drill of the Century. And after that, you've got Howard Sissoko. What's he doing? Risa Shimizu, Emma Snell, Hanoka Hayashi, Kirsty Smith, which is, again, another very interesting one, and Shalina Zadorsky, who is obviously unknown. Same question really as I've asked the other two. Can you see West Ham getting up that league any further, or do you worry that West Ham could be, as we've just spoken about with some of these other teams, in a bottom half fight?
Yeah, so I think with West Ham it's really hard, because it's similar to what we heard from Sir Jim earlier. There's not a lot of love from the board to the women's team at West Ham. It's just not really a massive priority in their, sort of, I can't think of the word. They're not a priority, and that's a shame. However, with the players that we have, we shouldn't be fighting relegation. We shouldn't be having a 6-pointer game against Bristol City, because the goalkeeper, our captain, took Australia to the semi-finals of a World Cup. She was one of the best goalkeepers. She got nominated for Goalkeeper of the Year alongside Mary Earps and Kata Cole. There's no way we should be sitting, and we've got to look at the rest of the team, of course. And in my opinion, she could do so much better than us, because we don't ever perform, but our vision just isn't there. We just don't have it. It's the project that everyone else is boasting about or is looking forward to, we don't have at all. And we should be doing better. And Kirsty Smith, we announced that yesterday that she's renewed, which is massive, which also gives me hope that hopefully Mackenzie Arnold stays. But I don't know is the answer. We've got a really great striker in Rico Ueki, who proved this season that she can score some absolute bangers out of nothing. So I just think I'm not a massive Rianne Skinner fan. I think that she's done an okay job at keeping us in the league. But if we're going to start competing, like all the other teams are starting to compete with their visions and their new projects, and we don't have that. So that's the only way we're going to get up. I don't think we get relegated next year. However, something needs to change, and I don't have the answers. So Crystal Palace, and you asked me, is it going to be a yo-yo, like we've always seen Norwich City come up in the Premier League and then go back down again, Burnley? I don't think that's going to be the case with Crystal Palace, and it's going to go one of two ways, and I can't answer this question right now because as of today, I think the window opened today. So Crystal Palace have to spend. This isn't like women's football we've seen in the past where you can just train them a bit better. You need good talent. You need to spend money because the rest of the teams around you are doing that. So you're not going to stay in the top tier of football unless you invest in the players, in the coaching staff, in your facilities. And I think Crystal Palace have that in them. Obviously, losing Elise Hughes to an ACL injury. She was their top scorer last season. She scored 16 goals. Crystal Palace were dominant last season in the Championship, and that's not an easy league to win. I think they beat Durham 9-1 and 5-1 last season. So they're a top scorer. They're a good goal-scoring team, and I think they do have a lot of pull, and I think they are a better team currently than Bristol City were. So they do need to bring in some experience. There was a couple of rumours going around that Fran Kirby was going to make a little move there. That'd be really interesting to see if that happens because, again, you need that sort of experience. When Bristol City came up, they brought Megan Connolly in and made her a captain. Was that the best move? Probably not, but she was there as someone who has been through the league, who knows that league inside and out, who knows the clubs, who knows the players. So they need something like that, but I don't think they'll get relegated. And like Meg said, I think Brighton, unless they sort themselves out, they've got a bit of an identity crisis since they let go of Mel Phillips. They need to reassess some things. But yeah, I'm excited to see Palace next year. I think that's going to be really interesting. Another London club, which is a bit annoying for the Northerners in the group. But yeah.
It's just Jess getting upset there, if we're honest. You can see that already. Listen, a brilliant little run through of sort of where we are. It's tricky. As you just said, the transfer window's not really been opened yet, so it's all rumour and conjecture at the moment. But what we can look at is what we have looked at, which is the people that we know are coming to the end of the contract, and then speculate, because that's all that is all that we're able to do. But something we don't need to speculate about, and really the focus of our last round of questions, is Newco, because the one big change that's going to be happening is that the FA will no longer be in charge of the WSL and the Women's Championship. Instead, it will now be Newco. They will be in charge of the 24 teams in the top two divisions, and the FA will still have a share in that. But effectively, it's going to be run by the clubs involved, which is quite interesting. Now, Jess, what they've said here, and this was just a quote that came from something that I read earlier on this year, because it's going from the FA to Newco, what they have said, and by they I mean, let me get her name, Nikki Doucette, she has said the following: we're going from, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, that's not me saying that, that's her, because we would not be here without the FA, being within a governing body to a standalone, revenue generating, for-profit independent entity with a 100% dedicated professional management team. She then goes on to talk about how these people are going to wake up every single day thinking about the project, the fan base, the clubs, and how we're going to grow this. The next few years are really about getting that up and running. So not a lot will change in terms of the clubs and the way that it's run, in terms of what we see in the day-to-day. But do you think, with Newco coming in, is there a bit of a worry for you? Because when I read that and I listen to what they're saying, for profit, just talking about the money, we've had conversations before about how, as I've said many times, I'm nervous about the money coming into the game, because I don't want it to get so ridiculously outrageous that it just ends up being another thing that's just for the money and not for the love of the game. Because I think that's what spoiled men's football. Do you worry that this is an avenue that we could eventually go down if we have? Because effectively it's the same as the Premier League to a degree here. It's going to be the clubs all having a vote and all having a share in what goes on. Do you think that's a positive move forward for the WSL and the Championship? Or do you think that this could be not the beginning of the end, because that seems a little bit harsh, but you know what I mean, the beginning of the gravy train, I suppose?
I think we're at a difficult point in women's football. Like, we need something to kind of drive the game forward. And I think I'm normally quite pessimistic as a person. However, I am going to try and reserve judgment on this. Whilst I do sometimes look at it and think, is this going to just be a big kind of marketing machine? Which essentially in some ways it is. You know, Nikki Duquette, I'm sorry, I'm just butchering everyone's names. You know, she's come from being like director or something at Nike. Her life up until this point has essentially been driving sales and increasing revenue. But realistically, that is what the women's game needs. And I like to think that because so many fans are kind of so protective over the women's game, that we are at a point where we don't have to follow exactly in the men's game's footsteps. You know, in some ways, them kind of paving the way gives us a blueprint for like, okay, well, we want to take this, this, and this from the men's game, but we don't like how this has happened. So at this stage, we still have the kind of opportunity to grow it how we want. But there does need to be more money in it to grow the game. That's the only way that the game's really going to grow. It's just got to be kind of sustainable. I know that they've just recruited in, this is Newco, the commercial director from Chelsea. And as we've already mentioned, Chelsea are one of the kind of front runners in English women's football in terms of getting revenue. You know, they've had lots of games at Stamford Bridge, which I think they're sort of reaching that point now where they're actually making a bit of money from games. You know, a lot of the times when games were being put on at Stamford Bridge and other men's stadiums, they were running at a loss essentially. So we are at a bit of a turning point now, which I think it's positive, getting people like that involved, people that have been part of the women's game. So yeah, I'm still a little bit concerned, but I'm going to try and kind of stay optimistic almost. My other concern is that obviously it's only really involves the top two tiers. So it's a worry, how is any money going to feed down to the lower tiers? Because what we don't want is to create such a massive gap between tiers 2 and 3 that no one can ever progress essentially. You know, if we're going to improve the women's game, that's got to be from the ground up as well. We can't just focus on the top 2 leagues, especially the kind of teams at the top of the WSL, because they're the teams that are traditionally linked with the men's clubs or the men's teams that are getting most of the money to begin with. So I think if it's done right, then fantastic. But yeah, we're going to have to just wait and see, I think, a little bit on that one.
Fair point. Meg, very simple question for you. In January, Nikki Duquette basically said the experience of going to a women's match is more like a Glastonbury experience. It's a festival experience. It's a very different fan base. Who doesn't want to be a part of that? This league is the future. Is this the right person to be in charge of the women's game effectively if she's coming out with, I'll be polite, comments like that?
I mean, I think it's too early to say whether yes or no she is the right person, because essentially we've not actually seen what Newco can do, because they've not been this governing body for a whole season, and you know, we haven't sort of seen what will go on behind the scenes to help these you know, well, to help the women's game in a sense. I think she came out early in the year and said the collective is stronger than any individual stakeholder. So when she says something like that, you think, oh, you know, she means all the clubs will be so involved with every decision rather than just someone at the top making all the decisions and being like, clubs, you just have to deal with this sort of thing. So if you look at it like that, you know, it sounds really positive. But why is she alluding to the fact that a game of women's football is like Glastonbury? I'm not quite sure what she means by that, because I've personally never been to a game of women's football and thought, I'm here raving at a festival, because I've never ever thought that.
Have you gone there when it's muddy and had a tent to stay in after the game?
No, exactly. So I genuinely can't see. Yeah, I genuinely can't see why she would like what. Yeah, like I'm speechless.
The best assumption I can come up with what she's trying to say there, and this is very much an assumption, is that the crowd are all friendly. They're all there to see the football. They're all there for the same reason. And it's not all, you know, angry all the time. You can walk there freely, safely, without having too much of a drama. That is the only thing I can give her that I think from that comment would be right. It's probably not the right comparison to draw, but I'm guessing that's what she's kind of talking about.
I mean, obviously the women's game is majorly friendly. I mean, if you compare it to the men's game, where, you know, you've got a lot more swearing, you know, there's still the occasional violence here and there. Obviously, it's not like the hooliganism that, you know, in the late 1900s sort of thing. But I wouldn't say that everyone goes to a women's football match to watch the football. I definitely think there's quite a majority of people that, you know, now the game has ballooned, if that's a good word to use, in such a short space of time, from, you know, people not really caring about it essentially to, okay, this is something we want to be involved in, we want to watch it. But there is definitely quite a big group of people that, you know, started watching it when the players were more accessible, when, you know, you could sort of easily get photos, you know, autographs, shirts after a game, because there wasn't the popularity wasn't there for people to want that after a game. But I definitely do think there is quite a big group of people now, probably youngsters, you know, the little kids, that's all they want when they want a photo, they want an autograph. And as much as that's great that, you know, they idolize these players, you know, we want the game to be watched for the game it is, you know, on the pitch. And it'll be interesting to see how much she listens to the fans as well, because, you know, the fans' opinions matter as much as the teams in the leagues do. And it's interesting what Jess was saying about the gap between the second tier and the third tier, because we've spoken so much about, you know, how we need to close the gap between the WSL and the Championship. And hopefully, yes, that's sort of closing more now, especially if we see Crystal Palace stay in the league next season. But yeah, I mean, if that gap, you know, starts to get bigger between the bottom of the Championship and the top of the National League, it won't be a good look for the women's game from the grassroots up to WSL. So yeah, it's very early days, so we can't say much, to be fair, but it's a waiting game. That's all it is, really.
Absolutely. And Mia, I suppose the last thing I would throw to you is, again, another thing that she said. She played basketball for St. Francis, so that was it. And she said she wouldn't call soccer my first sport. I see a different world because she didn't grow up in the UK. And so that alternate perspective, they think, should inject fresh ideas in. They have said they're not simply going to adopt the same strategy that has brought success to the men's game. So that is part of the reason it has been established in the way that they have. They're looking at what will make the league financially sustainable in the future, what that could look like. And all of the clubs are aligned with the concept of an investable structure. At the moment, the deal that the women have is worth around about £8 million with Sky Sports and the BBC. So as a result, they're going to hope to get an increase on that figure when they renegotiate that deal. But as they said, reach and revenue is the thing we're trying to figure out. I think more than anything, it should just be as easy as possible for fans to be able to watch the league or the team or the player that they want to watch. And how we do that is something that we're exploring, including the possibility of broadcasting games at 3:00 on Saturday afternoons as part of the new deal, which is currently banned in the UK, as you know, under Article 48. But the women's game could potentially get an exemption from that rule, which would be quite an interesting thing, because most people are sat there not watching Jeff Stelling anymore because he's left Soccer Saturday. Is that a potential sort of thing that we need to look at? Because we have said many times the fixtures when it comes to the women's game are all higgledy-piggledy, because we are effectively trying to ensure the men's game and the women's game doesn't get meshed together too much. So with that in mind, do you think that a 3:00 Saturday would be a good idea?
I don't think it really matters. I don't know. Is that an answer? I don't think it matters when they play football. If they play football at 3:00 on a Saturday, fine. If how it works at the minute also is fine. Like, it's sure, whatever they want to do, that's okay. I guess Saturdays are good for when, if you got work on Mondays, so you can travel far, maybe stay over and travel. It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter, in my opinion. Put the games wherever you want. I like a midweek game as well. That'd be fun. I have a slight problem with Newco though that I would like to share, and I just think it worries me that it feels like we're privatizing a league that was so community based in the first place. Like, it's like something that we've not built the WSL, but it feels like we've been a part of something that has grown with us in it. And I feel like when you have someone who, like you've just said there, Barry, some of those quotes are so far removed from English, like, origins of football and how we know football. And I just had some horrible thought in my head that we're going to have like half-time shows and lights, and Becky Hill's going to come out on a stage at like United Chelsea at LSV, and it's just the WSL have funding from Barclays, and that funding, men's football has never been. That's a lie. But in more recent times, it's always had a fair amount of funding. But the big one for men's football was when it was Barclays Premier League and they had the league sponsor. There's so much money pushed into that when I saw that Barclays were also sponsoring the WSL, it was like, perfect. We're going to have this nice influx of money. All of the clubs in that league are going to, I think they sponsor the championship as well. So all of these clubs are going to get nice sums of money. But I think the big thing is keeping its identity, realizing that the fans are everything in women's football. It's genuinely everything. In men's football, they can take it or leave it, because there's just so much investment and people will just watch it regardless. Wherever you are in the world, you're going to watch it. With women's football, if you don't turn up to the stadium, you can feel it. And I just hope that doesn't get lost. But the main thing is being like self-sustainable and being able to. God, I know I'm not naive to know that football is a business and they have to make money, and that's how it works. And I am terrified that it is going to end up in a place where we've got people in charge of something that just think it's an event, that don't really understand the true meaning of football, what it means to the fans and the people that turn up week in, week out. So I don't know what the committee looks like of Newco. I don't really know too much about it. Obviously, I heard the Glastonbury thing, and that sent me a couple of weeks ago, and I was just like, what does that even mean? I think it's a really good idea in terms of we need funding, right? That's the bottom line. We need funding. We need to move through it's getting too popular and it's not growing, if that makes sense. There's so much interest in women's football, but it's all just in a big bubble, and that bubble's getting really crammed. So we need to burst that bubble, but just make it a little bit bigger and then catch it all again, just so it can feel a bit better. So yeah, God, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I just hope that it doesn't go down the pan.
No, I think I agree. You've got a fan there in Emily with what she said as well. So well done. You've got lots of people agreeing with what you are saying. I have one quick fire question. You literally just have to answer yes or no to this, because when we were talking about what we were going to discuss as a group today, Connor, bless him, he of the massive quiff, popped in to talk about how Germany have now expanded or are looking to expand their league by 2 teams. And TJ just mentioned here, in the US, not 1 but 2 WOFO leagues have failed / gone bankrupt because they expanded too quickly. So simple yes or no question, but within the next couple of years, do you think that Newco should and will or should look to expand the WSL from 12 to 14 and potentially do the same with the championship as well, so that they go from 12 to 14? Is it worth doing that with the top 2 leagues? Would you just do it with the WSL, keep the championship at 12 and just have a couple more promoted from the WNL? Which isn't really going to be a yes or no answer there, I appreciate. So you can have 2 sentences, yes or no, and then a little explanation. I'm going to go the other way around because we've gone the same way around all the time. I'm getting dizzy now. So Mia, go.
Okay. Will they expand? Yes. Should they expand? No. They shouldn't.
But brilliantly succinct. Well done. Megan.
I mean, I could just say exactly the same as Mia. Will they expand? Probably yes. Should they at this, very moment in time or in the next couple of years? No, I think it's too early to do that.
Interesting. Jess?
The same, however, I am probably a little bit more keen for them to expand. That being said, I think it would be heavily dependent upon how things change under Newco. I think a lot of stability needs to happen, especially in the championship, before they expand.
Interesting. For anyone who cares, I think they should. I do. I think that an added 2 would be good in the WSL, but as far as the championship goes, I would keep that at 12. I would promote 2 at the end of next season. Promote 3. So 3 up, 1 down from the WSL. And then as a result, you have exactly what you need, which is 12 teams in the championship still. So yeah, that's what I think I would do. But then again, I'm not an American marketing genius, nor an owner of any of those clubs. So as a result, my opinion is it's worth about as much as this antique clock that I've apparently got. So there we go. Guys, I've really enjoyed it. It's flown by, but we have managed to do a whole 90 minutes. And the time it's taken us to talk, Italy have equalised against Croatia in the very last minute to stop Croatia from taking that second spot in the 98th minute. Scotland went out in the 100th minute, right in the end. And now the same thing sort of happened there to Croatia. It is really all going to the wire in the men's Euros. But here, we've had a superb chat. It's been absolutely brilliant. We will be back next Monday, when my understanding is that King Connor will be back. I speak of King Connor, and we very rarely plug anything else in any other show, but he has done a superb interview with Fallon Tullis-Joyce, which is available on North United WFC. And it's not all just talking about Manchester United, it's getting to know her as a player. So for that reason, if you haven't gone on there to have a look, please do go and have a little watch. I'm not going to ask you to like and subscribe because you might not be a Manchester United fan, but it's definitely an interview worth watching. Goes in a little bit, dives in to talk about her marine biology as well. And of course, she answers the most important question of all: do you eat a burger with a knife and fork? You have to find out. It's been brilliant. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next week.